There was a way to check. How about now? That looks pretty live.
There we go. All right.
Cool. All right, we're live. Welcome everyone. First meeting of MySec Grand Rapids. Yay! I'm Ryan Plass, coordinator, co-coordinator with lovely Carla Miller. Don't believe she is here. Nope. Cool. Well, shout out to her in internet land then. I guess we're going to get started. Today we're going to be hearing from Guile. He's going to talk about his journey into Infosec. Announcements. If you go to the Converge website, the convergeconference.org, the keynote speakers are up. So check that out. And Kyle.
1 second. So you're running this off. One laptop's kind of fun, so don't mind me. All right. I'm Kyle Andrus. Hi, friends. Hi, Kyle. Just going to talk a little bit about my journey and how I got into Infosec, which is kind of like my stumbling through school and my first jobs, and then a couple of just kind of points that I found kind of important. But I think everybody in this room knows that everybody can fall into Infosec or get into Infosec from different places. So, but a little bit about me. I've been in IT, basically fixing computers, networking, things like that, for about 13 years total. So I've kind of touched everything and then forgotten everything and then remembered things again as my career is basically demanded of it. And then the last 5 have been really focused in kind of that incident response and forensics. Again, I'm also I'm a local coordinator for MySec Jackson. I'm also a B-Sides Detroit and Converge organizer. So I try my best to try and just get people interested in MySec. Come on out, share your experiences and kind of things that you love. Like, that's the best part. It's really like lightning talks. Anybody here have a 10-minute lightning talk they could give right now if you raise your hand? This guy does. And again, like I said, my current job is kind of in that digital forensics IR field. So I do everything from your host-based forensics, so grabbing a hard drive, taking an image, parsing out all the digital artifacts, doing memory forensics, grabbing a copy of running memory, and trying to answer those questions to figure out, okay, did this person actually open these things and do these things? Did someone actually steal a document? If this malware ran, how did it run on there? So those are the puzzles I like to solve at my job currently. It also advances over into like those advanced threat detections as well. So like, how do you detect emerging threats? Because antivirus doesn't really do it for you, right? You have to have things more like behavioral detections, or you start getting into things like EDR or endpoint detection and response, which brings you extra visibility into your network and your endpoints to let you like actually find this stuff. And so I get to play in that space right now, and it's a lot of fun. So again, I think that everybody in this room, who is in Infosec right now? Raise your hand. Yeah. So there's only a couple, so I thought it was going to be the other way, but that's fine. So out of curiosity, anybody, what was your first job in Infosec, and how did you make that leap? Anybody?
IT.
So,
IT, but it was PCI.
Yeah, so you went from IT, and then,
Security.
yep.
Network.
Networking, okay.
Networking.
From networking side?
Networking into
Okay.
software dev.
Yeah, software dev into it, okay.
I was jumped right into being a SOC analyst as an intern.
Yep, and jumping right into a SOC analyst, that's like perfect. By the way, I'm repeating everything just for the mic, by the way, for the people on the stream, just so I'm not crazy. So yeah, like you kind of get a quick feeling that there's not really one way into Infosec. There's a lot of different ways. And I found that too, especially for getting into forensics, and you'll see kind of like my job flow and where my experience came from, and how that dropped me into doing a lot of this forensic stuff. So again, my story is, when I was a kid, I loved taking things apart. I got a computer. I remember having a 25 megahertz machine trying to play Descent 2, the video game, but I had to scale down my video so it was like this big. And then I played online, which is crazy at the time, over dial-up. And I just always really enjoyed it. And eventually I ended up going to Central Michigan University. And I almost didn't go into computers. So at the time, like, I had two kind of passions. I love computers, but I also love bio, like biology and everything else. So when I got on campus, my dad made sure the first thing I did was get a job somewhere. And so we were going through a tour of the computer science department, and like the voice in the back of my head, my dad's like, "You better get that job." I'm like, "All right, yeah." And so during the tour, they're like, "Hey, we also have this position open where you can be like a help desk guy, where you basically refill printers and you tell people where the computers are. And it's a computer lab, so they're everywhere." And that was it. And I ended up taking that job. And that job spiraled into where I am today. So it started off with me doing printers, and this amazing thing happened. If you show up on time every single day, and then you stay a little extra, and you're just the right amount of energy and happiness, you get promoted. So I went from like printer duty to managing the printer people. Yeah. And then eventually, even after that, I got myself into being the assistant manager of Pierce. Of the computer science department, where I actually got to help like build classes and do all this other stuff. Met this guy over here. And we'll get into that in a second. But another big thing is I had some internships, and I think the one big advantage of going to college, because some people are like, do you need it or not? We've got a slide for that later. We'll have some debate maybe, I don't know. But I think internships are probably the most important thing that you can get out of college, especially for IT, like security or programming, because they allow you to get that experience, that foot in the door, try and prove yourself to a company. And for companies, I'm learning more and more that corporations are like, so let me get this straight. You're going to come into our company. We're going to pay you like not even what you're worth, like down here, but we're going to make you do a full-time employee's work, and you don't count in our full-time headcount stuff. Yeah, how many interns can we get? So it's kind of crazy, because you'll find that depending on what company you go to, interns may not do anything, or interns may be running like in an actual entire field in like in a department. It's just nuts what I've seen. And for me, my internships I went to, one was kind of lame, but it was like a quality assurance. So all I did was like walk through and click physically, like this button works, that button works, that checkbox works, that one works, right? That documentation, and then fixing the documentation. And then my second one was actually for Jackson National Life Insurance. So at that time, the big programming rave was all Java. So I was a Java programmer at the time. And so I got an internship there. And that taught me one of the first important lessons in my life was that writing real code takes a lot of time. If you just script something together, you can do that pretty quick. But when it comes to making an actual application that has proper error handling, that has proper logging, that has debugging routines, like all the stuff that makes an application worth its grain of salt, I learned that kind of going through that internship. And Jackson National Life was actually a great first internship. They paid pretty well too. And then so I've been at Central. I was there for 4 years. I got this information technology degree. And I just got promoted to the assistant manager of the computer science department. I could have graduated, but I realized that I went through and destroyed all my classes. I aced all my IT courses, but I really couldn't tell you the difference between a router and a switch. And my degree was supposed to be in computer networking and technology stuff, and that scared me. And that's actually when I ran into Martin. So I was just a tech trying to get some Cisco routers working for a class, and he stumbled by. Martin has a lot of experience that I'm sure some of you have already figured out or seen or listened. If you come to the socials, the socials at Grand Rapids MySec are when?
The last Thursday.
The last Thursday of every month. And so from that, just kind of, I got someone that actually had an idea or some experience as to what the world actually looks like. And so I learned what I didn't know very quickly. And that really helped me kind of set my direction. And so I actually stayed on for another degree for computer science. So I was like a long-term like college kid. I was like, da, 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 college forever, loans, more. I don't have to pay them back, right? And yeah, and so that's about the time that we actually made this, this lab at Central Michigan called Canal. Originally, it was the Advanced Network Architecture Lab. But when you make that an acronym, it doesn't sound very good. So, you know, you just add a little Central's Advanced Network Architecture Lab, Canal. So, and that eventually where our name was. And in this lab was where I learned pretty much all the skills that really helped. So we would build, there's 5 like courses of IT, and they kind of did like A+, Net+. I think there's a Security Plus at some point, but, and then the networking courses. So it was up to us to kind of like help the students along with these courses. And on our end, that means that we had to know actually kind of what we were doing. And usually we kind of did, but doing that enough times, you get really good at troubleshooting, you get better at Linux, you get better at just networking in general and the operating system. And that's what really like, it was just huge. Like from that, being in that lab, and literally it was like 80 hours a week for 3 years? Is that how long we're there? Yeah. It definitely gives you a lot of that experience that you need. And also realize like all the things I could have been doing, you know, when I was a student before that, and just didn't know. So, and this, like I said, that's where I learned a lot. And then the first job, so remember I went to that internship with Jackson National Life. I had a lot of fun there. The recruiters loved me. I was at a recruiting event and they came over and picked me up and took me away from like their competitor. So I thought like, oh, I'm a shoo-in. I can easily apply for like an entry-level job and kind of start my career from there. But that's when the recession hit. And the recession just wiped out all these the internships I had and other job opportunities that I had were all gone. So I thought I was like lined up for something great, and then it just flushed and went down the hill. So my first job actually ended up being at Liquid Web. And this is also another great place to work. At least it used to be when I was there. And I say that because they were crazy. When you're first coming into that company, you're doing training, and they give you the root password to their DNS servers for all of Liquid Web. And that's what you trained on. That's craziness. They used to have like this archaic machine in like the back corner, and it would just, its entire job was to just keep track of people's passwords for all the hundreds of machines we had. So every day you'd come into work and you would print off all the passwords in paper. And then if you're helping a customer and you change the password, you go back to that machine, type the password in, change it, and save it. Craziness. But a lot of fun because you learn like all this kind of weird stuff, and you learn quickly that working in web hosting, you see things that you don't want to see because that's just the internet. And troubleshooting, like, hey, the images don't work. Oh, I got them working. Oh, nope, I should shut that back off. Yeah, it's a very, ISPs are something else, that's all I know. And then, so I'm at Liquid Web. I've been there for about 7 months, and 4 months in, I got promoted to their QA department. And it's like that QA internship back in the day finally pulled its weight and got me in there. And so I was doing the same kind of push button testing, but it was for like their cloud, their Storm on demand, something whether. But anyway, but I got this call back from consumers. And I had applied like a year before I graduated and never heard anything from them. And they're like, hey, you want to come out and like interview? I'm like, sure, why not? And I go through the interview, and at this point, my last 4 or 5 years have all been Linux. Never touched Windows or done Windows admin. And they're like, we think that you'd be a great fit for this 3rd level support Windows job. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah.
2 questions. You said could have graduated. Did you?
Which, oh, for the first time?
No, you said could have graduated from Central. But did you end
Oh, yes, yes. I eventually did graduate. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Consumers is who?
Consumers Energy. Some utility.
Yeah.
I forget that. Yeah, I say that too much. Good point. This guy out here, he knows some stuff. Anyway, so get this 2-year callback. I go through the interview, they give me like a pamphlet of all this Windows stuff to do, and I'm like, have no idea how to answer any of this stuff. They're like Windows commands all over the place. And I'm sitting on the side, I'm like, don't know, but I would try this, or I would Google this, or I would, you know, that's basically the only way I could answer it. Ended up getting it, which was a lot of fun. And then 9 years later, so I worked that role for about 4 years. And I got really, really good at, how many people here have used the Windows like debugging tools like WinDBG, sysinternals? So there's tools like ProcMon, Process Monitor, Process Explorer. I got really good at those type of tools because, again, I was working for a company that has been around for over 100 years. And they had old systems that were migrated to an older, like an old system was migrated to a new system. That new system was new like 15 years ago. So it's just like this chain of just terribleness. And so I was called in because like the third level support's like, this is the last we got before we go to the vendor and we just start praying, or we're going to start spending a lot of money to replace these systems. So I'd get called in to fix things like that. And I really enjoyed it. Like, yeah. But eventually you get tired of that. And mostly like I got tired because I really had like this burning passion inside me for security. I've always wanted to do more security stuff, and I kept like doing small home projects, playing around with like Kali, and it wasn't even Kali before that. What was it? Backtrack. Thank you. You know, and like just I'm like, you know what? If I don't try and make a move now, I'm never gonna be able to make that into Infosec. I got really lucky though, because where I was working, the director of the cybersecurity program, who has been on these emergency conference calls where things are burning around, and I would come in and try and fix something and do the best I can, noticed that work, noticed my IT skills, and was like, you know what, you'd probably be good in forensics. And so he gave me that shot. So when a position opened up, I applied, and that's what really got me in there. And then from there, I've had just a lot of training, a lot of terribleness thrown at me on a regular basis, which I think is the best way to learn, actually. Like, the more that things are on fire, the more that I learn. Some people aren't like that. I like strive for stressful environments. It's weird. But yeah, and so then as I'm at Consumers, a gentleman called, their name Matt Johnson showed up. And he brought this MySec thing with him. I'm like, what's that? And this is the first time that I ever heard of like a local security conference or like a community. I was living under a rock or something. And I actually went to my first B-sides with him. I was like, oh man, this is crazy. Like, the only thing I've been going to for X years is DEF CON. And DEF CON is just crazy because there's tons of people, tons of things to do. And then you go to a B-sides and you're like, hey, where is everybody? So, but then we actually built the first branch of MySec, which is MySec Jackson. And then from there, we've grown to Lansing, Grand Rapids. And the goal is the same, where it's been this kind of passion to get other people excited about security, about their interests, and see how we can help them. Or see what we can do to bring interesting people here so that people can learn from them. And it's been an awesome, awesome time. And then Converge B-Sides Detroit, again, Matt and another guy named Ryan Harp, who I became friends with because of MySec. This is like chaining of things that happens. Like, I feel like that's how most of us get our career. It's either that or Twitter. And from that, I actually started helping organize the conference. And conference organizing is pretty interesting, especially ticket sales. So ticket sales for our conference, we don't have anything sold until like the last 3 to 4 weeks before the conference is like 70% of our ticket sales. So you're sitting there, you get all this stuff planned out, and you're like, you see this, we're in the red by like this much. You're like, oh man, we're in the red that much. I don't know if we're gonna make it this year. And we say that every year, like, we're not gonna make it. And then like the weeks go up to it, and it's like the day before, and we're like, oh, we finally have enough to pay for the things. Yes, we can have a conference tomorrow. So that's been a very fun, yeah. So that's kind of like my career and kind of how I, honestly, in my opinion, I've just kind of fallen through it. I never really had an aggressive plan or a path that I could just easily see to go towards it. But Infosec is, again, like an advanced discipline. There's a variety of ways to get into it, whether you're doing compliance, whether you're doing pen testing, defensive stuff. You still need engineers to build things. You still need ops people in your SOC too. So there's a lot of different job roles that you can get you into InfoSec. And this Rob Fuller, or Mubix, he's actually got a GitHub posting, which is pretty cool, because he's been collecting all of the blog posts on how to get into InfoSec. So if you're ever curious about a specific InfoSec that, like if you want to do pen testing, or if you want to do defense stuff, there's probably a blog post on there that'll actually give you more of like, this is what I actually did to get to this career. So it's a really good read, and they're pretty good. But in general, I always felt that, you know, having your good kind of general knowledge down is what's going to make you successful. And again, I think programming is probably the most important skill to kind of start with, because with programming, you learn, you know, like how the computer is actually, I mean, you're writing a program, right, to run on a computer. That'll teach you a lot, and those skills will carry over to everything that you do. If you're doing networking, eventually you can only do so much networking with the GUI before you start having to automate, right? And so you need to script, so programming. There's only so much you can do for system administration work. Installing applications by hand is lame. Eventually you're going to script or write something for it. Eventually when you're, you know, being a pen tester and you're using someone else's tool, eventually you're like, I think the tool should do something slightly different. You're going to try and do something. So it's kind of like the earlier you get a good handle on programming, I feel it carries you really, really far, because you'll stand out from anyone else that you're competing against when you're sitting there scripting your job away and then just playing, like, you know, going on Imgur, cats. And then of course, system IT or system administration, knowing how to install an operating system, whether it be Windows, Linux, Macs. Sorry, I don't like Macs. Most because I never had an opportunity to have one, so. But you know, those fundamentals is also what you build on. So I mean, when you're thinking of your defense in depth, you know, the endpoint, you have to know how to configure it to make it, you know, less vulnerable to someone's attack. And then networking, because if you have the most secure computers in the world, but they're on the internet, that's a problem. So networking, I feel, goes kind of like that next category. And then communication skills, right? Being able to communicate to people technical topics into something that's easier to understand is huge. Oh, I thought you raised your hand for a second. You're just scratching your head. But yeah. How do you learn communication skills? Oh, man. So there's this local community event called MySec that you can go and do talks at. That's an issue. There's a lot of books that I'm right now blanking on. God, what's that one? Nope, not going to come to me. Well, suggestions? Anybody else?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah, it's the one. How to Win Friends and Influence People is another great book. What's that?
The Prince by Machiavelli.
Yeah. True. So those I feel will kind of accelerate your way into InfoSec if you don't just start there anyway, because it is possible to do that now. I feel like when I first started, there weren't like entry-level positions open for security, right? Security was the advanced discipline you applied to the work that you're already doing in networking, sysadmin, things like that, or programming. And then, you know, a lot of people ask about college degrees versus certifications. So which one is required? Does anyone think that a college degree is required to get into InfoSec? No hands go up. Does anyone think that certifications are required to get into InfoSec? No hands go up. Yeah. And that's exactly it, because if anything, certifications just kind of expose you to more of the tools that are out there, more techniques that you can use. And if you don't have anything to begin with, it's an easy way to start getting experience in InfoSec. So like your Security Plus exam by CompTIA, which many people kind of laugh at and think about, but if you don't have anything, that's a great first, very cheap, like $300 security certification that you can get. So it's very reachable. Unlike if you try to get like a certification from SANS, where you're going to spend $7,000 for the course, and then it's a 6-day course that you also have to pay for hotel and like food and travel. So that's like $10,000. Those are heftier certifications, but they're usually out of reach from anyone that's trying to get into it, because they usually don't have $10,000 just to drop. And then college, it's, you've got a lot of those networking opportunities. Again, like I met Martin, and I think the most important lesson I learned from him was how to actually troubleshoot a problem, like how to break it apart. Because many times I found myself when I was at school freaking out because I have to do something and I have no idea where to start, right? And that can stop a lot of people from advancing forward. And so with his help and his patience, I was able to do a lot of really fun projects. Anything from, was it a kernel edit we made for, we were deploying operating systems, so we need to go from 32 to 64-bit. So we wrote like a hook.
Yeah, from KC Linux?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as to automatically detect the 64
Yep.
whether or not and choose different thing.
I don't know if I was successful at the end of that, but I remember how much fun I enjoyed learning and getting to that point. And also building, I had like a Halloween party at one of my many apartments. And we put together all these old UPS power switches. Relays, sorry. And we were able to use that to basically control 3 outlets. So we basically made a party rave that would sync up with music at a very terrible way. Some songs worked great, and it was like, yeah, it's working. Other songs were just like, it was a strobe light. But stuff like that. I think I lost my train of thought on that, sorry. Yeah, and then of course, internships. I think college is very important, because that can get you into that kind of first experience and first job. Because I know a lot of people that currently either have a degree and then they want to get into InfoSec, but everything is either entry level, which gets filled out quick, and then everything else is internships, which they won't let you go into because you're not in college. So doing it when you're in college is just a prime time to do it. Of course, research opportunities, applying for jobs, that's kind of self-explanatory. And the other big reason to have your college degree is because many companies, if you're going for a corporation, they won't even look at your resume if you don't have a degree on there. I hope more companies walk away from that, because I know a lot of awesome people who don't have a degree, have a partial degree and things like that, that's incredible talent that companies have walked away from just because like, oh, you didn't meet the checkbox. So, and the same thing goes for certs too, right? You can have a bajillion certs and be like, I'm super smart with all these certs I have, but you might not actually be good at what you're doing, or you may have a giant ego, and that's terrible. But. And then of course, community. So I know a lot of people that either just from Twitter or local security meetups have gotten into InfoSec, gotten their first internships if they're in college, just by showing up and starting to talk to people. In MySec, we have 2 meetups every single month. So we have our formal meeting like this, and we always have the social. Because different people, some people like to go to a talk, some people just like to socialize. So we try and get both in every single month just to get people together. And then, there's other groups online, there's other Slack channels. MySec has a great Slack channel too. We've got over 380 people in active, a mix of anyone from, wants to get into InfoSec to InfoSec veterans. So if you have questions, there's more than likely someone there that can answer it or help you in many ways. Yeah. Any questions on that stuff? That's my rambling InfoSec thing, by the way. It's not like a guarantee you're going to win, but. Or does anyone else have experiences or things to add that benefited them?
So another benefit of, I know for MySec meetups, I know one of the first ones I went to was Southfield. And I didn't actually wasn't looking for a job at that point, but there was quite a few people there looking for a job, and there was a number of employers there. And within like the actual like month or two afterwards, it was neat to find out a lot of the people actually got jobs through MySec. So it's that community to kind of add on to what you were saying. It's not necessarily just that community. It's about also to learn from each other. There's job opportunities. There's other employers there. There's people that are going to help you out and try to get you a job too. So.
Anybody else?
Yeah, just add on a little bit. Networking is a huge piece, and I mean that in the social sense. MySec's awesome. The Slack channel's great. I've personally had questions, whether it be about forensics or red teaming or whatever it is. Someone's always got an answer almost immediately, too. It's kind of awesome. And then a shameless plug for the Grand Rapids ISSA and the other ISSAs. We have 2 of the board members in the room right now, so figured I'd throw that out.
And just a reminder for those members that you can always give your the meeting information to your local MySec coordinator, and we can add it to the MySec calendar so that more people are aware. So, anybody else have? Just running around, don't mind me.
It's also useful when you want one of those BF certifications that don't prove anything. Some of them need somebody else to sign off on you. And when I was in that position a while ago, the old GRSec was where the guy who signed off on my CISSP met me up at. And in addition to ISSA, there's also the ISC squared here in town. We'll make sure we get them on your calendar too.
Definitely. And like I love certifications because they kind of force you to go back to that college mode and start learning something from scratch. But I never feel like it's the experience and journey of like studying for that exam that actually you learn and get something from. It's not just like because I have it, I am this. At least that's my opinion. But anybody else have any?
On that subject of college and certifications, I feel like there's kind of different goals there as well. As college gives you a good foundation, hopefully you're taking a lot of like theory and stuff that's going to last you a long time, but maybe not help you do any particular job. Whereas a certification tends to be very specific on a topic and expect it to be outdated, you know, in 10 years or less, right? It's going to be you're going to be doing something completely different, and that knowledge isn't as generally applicable as I think a college degree. So I think you're right. Both have value. Neither is required. Both are good to have. So,
unless you get the Security Plus from what 2012, which has a no expiration date on it.
Plus from 2010.
That's even better. Anyone else have anything else to add before we shut this down, or? All right. Well, that's it. That's my little introduction to, well, not really intro, just me rambling about Infosec. So that's it. Oh, I can't find the mouse.